Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 103. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very, very special guest down in Texas, the one and only Maxx Chewning. Max, how are you, man?
What's up, dude? Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to give the people a good, entertaining, maybe knowledge-filled Potter. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be a great time. Now, I don't think you know this because I don't think you've seen any of the DMs, but over the past year, I've sent you about a dozen DMs. I think once a month has been my cadence, trying to get you on the podcast. And I know the inbox gets full, but one of my team members actually sent me a screenshot of a story you had put up and said, "Hey, Max is looking for podcast guests." And I was like, "Hey, why not?" So I sent you an email and you emailed back, and here we are. And it's a bit surreal for me because I'll be honest, I think I found you through your first YouTube video, which, if I'm remembering correctly, was like a 30-second video of you deadlifting 11 years ago.
But that's crazy, man. And yeah, no, I'm glad we could connect. I know the whenever I hear from influencers or whatever, and so I was like, hey, so sorry I couldn't get back to all my DMs get flooded. Usually I'm like, oh, they're fluffing it up, but in reality, what the problem is on that is someone like myself, I post, I don't know, 10 to 15 stories a day. So not only the messages you're getting, you're also getting about 10 to 20 like responses for every story you post. So I mean, it's like well over 100 plus a day, and it just like, I don't know. I wish I needed to do like live chats all the time so I could just get chat with everyone there. But I'm glad we could connect, man.
Me too. Now, we share two podcast guests in common. I've had your brother Chase on the podcast, episode 33. I've had Nick Bear on the podcast, episode 83. Here we are, episode 103 with Maxx Chewning. Now, I went back.
Threes, dude.
Three's a good number, man. I went back and listened to your episode with Nick. You asked him a question that I want to ask you to kick things off. You're in an Uber, and the driver turns to you and says, "Hey, Max, what do you do?" What is your answer?
I say I'm a YouTuber at heart, man. I like to identify as the social media version of myself, and then because that's kind of what I am at the core. And then from everything that I've done, I've stemmed off into being a business owner. So it'd be like, yeah, making you videos on the internet, kind of filming my life, my dog, my girlfriend, my businesses, which I have a couple. One of them is a clothing company and a candy company. So I'm a YouTuber / entrepreneur / cool guy.
So now the driver turns to you and says, "That's all. That's awesome. But tell me who you are without mentioning anything that you do. Tell me who you are without mentioning what you do for work." What's your answer then?
I don't think I've ever been in a situation to ask that question. But if it was like my brother on here, he'd be like, "I'm a husband, brother, son." Like I'm thinking of what my brother would say, that shit. I think I'm a goofy guy who is just trying to figure out what his purpose is in life. That's kind of what I do.
I like that. Now, for context, we're just meeting for the first time. There are people listening to this episode who have been here for a while, also people who haven't listened to an episode. And so the reason why I've created this podcast is to share stories and help people find strength in their struggle. A little bit of background on me: I have a genetic eye condition causing me to lose my sight over time. So I'm headed down a path toward blindness. And over time, I've come to a place where I see that as a blessing. It's presented me with a lot of opportunities, and it's changed my perspective on life. And my hope is that all of the podcast episodes, including this one, can reach people who need a message of hope and encouragement, who are going through hard things and or choosing to do hard things and just need a little bit of push.
Yeah.
And my hope is that we can get there today. And so I'll kick it off with kind of the first question I like to ask everybody is, and it's a deep one, so you can take a sec here. If you look back at your entire life, what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle that you didn't get to choose for yourself?
I mean, I'd probably say the death of my dad would, I mean, something that was definitely a tough time to go through at a young age, which he passed away from ALS in 2005, which I was like 15 at the time. And I had not been living with him for the past like 5 years because our parents were divorced. So I lived with him for most of my childhood up until I was 10. But yeah, I mean, losing him obviously was just like with losing any loved one, is a very traumatic, tough time to go through. And for me, it was more of I didn't really kind of conceptualize what was happening at 15, which now I look back and it's weird that even at 15, I didn't process it as much, but usually it kind of impacts me a lot more now as I'm older and realizing, the memories that I didn't get to have, the photographs that I don't have, the videos that I don't have with them. So that was something that was definitely an extremely tough time. And, if there, I don't even like to use the phrase of silver lining to a death, but his passing absolutely impacted myself and my brother, my whole family in a way that really changed what we ended up becoming because of his passing. Obviously, I would give it all up and just take whatever path I was supposed to go to have him still here today. But that was out of my control, and it's been something my family's been dealing with for, since that dreadful day. And yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it as, his passing made me the person that I am today.
When you look back, are there characteristics that you have now that 100% you got from your dad?
I mean, again, I was pretty young, and then even up until 10, it's hard to remember a lot of them. I think I get told that I do by my family rather than me necessarily thinking it or carrying on these attributes. But from what I can remember and what I was told is that my dad was someone who was similar to me in terms of always wanted people to laugh, always was the one to kind of brighten a room, and to just be the goofy kind of guy in a maybe morbid world we're kind of living in certain situations. But yeah, I'd probably say the personality of maybe the humor, the jokes, the kind of not taking life that seriously, and probably a little too casual sometimes, where people are like, Max, are you like, you need to be serious. But yeah, I'd probably say that's probably the biggest thing.
I was going to ask, and you might not have an answer for this. I'm not sure if you've reflected on it, but do you in any way, shape, or form feel like the goofiness or the humor is almost a way to protect yourself from certain things that you're going through or experiencing?
I mean, you could say like a lot of people are really anti like the self-deprecating humor of making fun of yourself, poking fun because it's like it's an inner thing, and I think that does apply to a lot of things and people, but it's not necessarily the way I kind of look at it, as I'm not like crying myself to sleep at nighttime. I think what I do with my humor is more um it's more of like I just poke fun at the things that I know people are going to poke fun at regardless. So I'm just kind of like rabbiting myself and, dissing myself before someone else can diss me. But no, I don't really look at it that deep. And I'm sure there's a lot of deep thinking individuals that'll be like, that is the reason why. It's because you don't even process. I'm not like, I'm really not a deep thinker. And I don't know if your podcast is like that, like really getting me into the mental and stuff. And that's not me. If you talk to my brother, his responses is exactly what probably you're looking for. I've just never been a deep spiritual enlightened thinking way of approaching life. I'm more of just surface level. Not that I don't have a little bit of depth, but yeah, I mean that's kind of like a tougher question for me to handle answer because it's not necessarily the way I kind of like look at everything. I just yeah, so
Yeah, and I'm not looking for any kind of answer, just whatever comes to mind. And I guess to go off of that, I think by putting yourself out there on YouTube, Instagram, social media, by sharing your life, I would imagine that you are misunderstood often. Whether that's through comments or interactions, people think they know who you are, but they might actually not know what's going on behind the scenes. Is there anything in life that people assume is really easy for you because you do it well, but maybe behind the scenes is actually challenging for you to do?
yeah, making these sick ass YouTube videos that I film. No, I mean, I think it really applies for like essentially anyone. I mean, when you're looking at the successes someone has. So for me, it's definitely probably like um maybe the business success. Will take sour strips for example. People see that, I have a large social media following. I started a brand. Oh, who would have known it's gonna, do really well? But behind the scenes, I'm doing the day in, day out tasks and operations necessary to grow the business, and have been doing so since day one. And as well as like kind of even the YouTube, probably people look at the vlogs and see the casualness of them and think that it's maybe a simple task to do. And on one level, it is the fact that I can kind of do whatever I want and film it. But if you were able to step inside my brain, the way that I think about how I'm going to shoot, how I'm going to start the video, there's a lot more to it. And it really, people will never know the intricacies of really anyone's uh, processes until they get in the weeds themselves.
Yeah, there's a quote, I don't know who said it, but it goes, "It takes hard work to make it look easy." And
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, there was a period of time where I was watching your YouTube, Christian's YouTube, Nick's YouTube every single day. It was what I looked forward to. And one of the things I noticed about you in particular was you would drive your car into a parking spot. And I would think to myself, that must have taken him 45 minutes to film 10 seconds worth of a YouTube video. Is that actually what it looked like behind the scenes, setting up the camera, getting out of the car, so on and so forth? Like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my shots, I try to, I mean, I hate to say like try to think of it like how a movie would be filmed because they're not like on a movie level, but the idea is just like with my videos, I want the process of the viewer to just like see some aspects of myself as the subject doing certain things, and if I want to go from point A to point B, I'm someone who always wants a kind of like a transitional type of thing of how did I get there, right? Rather than just appearing there, and just appearing there is a strategy in of itself, or it's not a, or it's on the opposite side of it. It's someone who has no idea how to properly film, just is boom boom, we're at some new place. There's no kind of like how you got there. And so when I do these shots of like maybe setting up the car, the idea isn't for you to think of, wow, Max is by himself. He got out of the car, put the camera, drove his car around. That's not how I want people to think about it. It's more of like, I wanted a scene of establishing shot of to show that I'm at a gas station and my car pulling in, rather than saying, hey guys, all right, now I'm at a gas station. I just can establish the scene by showing my car pulling in, and then I can start the process. So that's kind of like the idea behind it, is just to establish where I'm at. So yeah, and then sometimes I get ridiculous with them just as kind of like a funny thing, or I'll show myself running back to get the camera. But yeah, I mean it's really all for the continuity and the flow of the video. Or at least that's my goal.
Yeah. Speaking of showing people how you got from point A to point B, I would love to hear more about how you've built the businesses you've built. But I'm going to first ask the next question, and I'm thinking it'll lead here, but I could be wrong. What's the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose in your life, and why did you do that thing?
The hardest thing I've ever done on purpose. Um, I mean, I probably just starting the businesses. I mean, it's something that like the intricacies and the difficult the difficulty level of what you're about to go into, the endeavor you're about to start that down, going down that road, it's the unknown. There's gonna be a lot of work, but you have no idea what that amount of work is going to be, what it's going to entail, and you're choosing to go down the difficult path when maybe there is a clearer, easier route you could go. For me, just making the YouTube videos has its complications in itself, but I could have continued to do that, found success at it, maybe even found more success at it than I am now, because my focus would have been 100% on the content rather than, putting my hand into multiple pots. But I think that I like being challenged, and I like pushing myself and seeing what I'm capable of. And yeah, I mean, starting the businesses would absolutely be kind of the most difficult thing that I knew I was going to go down. But I use Sour Strips as the most references rather than Ever Forward, because Ever Forward was a very like 5-6 year learning curve that was a very slow kind of upward growth, whereas Sour Strips has been a significantly faster upward trajectory that has taken a lot quicker of a learning curve for me to add on to my plate and my team's plate. So that's really the reason why I referenced that one. And with Sour Strips is like I didn't know what I was getting into when I started it, of how quickly I'd have to grow up in terms of my operations business side.
So I'd love to use Sour Strips as the example as we continue forward here, but I just have to ask, why candy? I mean, how did you settle on Sour Strips? And do you remember the moment where you were thinking, yeah, this is going to be the next thing that I do?
I mean, I get a lot of inspiration. I mean, I've told the story a couple of times of how I've been a diehard candy fanatic. I think a lot of people start businesses for just to, I mean, the whole point of a business is to make money, right? But or else it's just a hobby. Is, I wanted to start something, but I think a lot of people go down the path of like, how can I just make the quickest amount of money in the shortest amount of time? And there's not an emotional or reason behind it. Probably why those types of people, I'd probably classify them in like the people who are like drop shipping on Amazon of wooden coat hangers. I don't think they have a passion for wooden coat hangers and grew up with their dad making, in the wood shop making coat hangers. They're just like, what's the fastest way I can make money and move on to the next thing, right? And that's fine in itself. The challenge they find is just maximizing the money. Whereas me, I like to have a little bit more of a reasoning why I'm doing something. And I also would like it to make, hopefully a lot of money. With candy, I have just been, I'm like I've always questioned how people could be addicted to something. Like when I would see people like smoke cigarettes or whatever, I'd be like, I just don't understand. Like, why don't you just stop? And they'd be like, well, I'm addicted. Like and I'm like, yeah, but you should just stop. Like, why can't you just stop? And I couldn't wrap my head around how someone could be addicted to something until I realized and compared it to my eating of candy, where if there's a massive pile of candy, and I'm not talking like a bag, I'm talking like if there's an unlimited supply, I'll literally just eat it until I'm physically ill, and I just can't stop myself, and I just keep eating it. I can't have like one, I have to have 100, and it's like more than just my whole life. I've always been the person in the friend group who just is pounding candy, specifically sour candy. So I've just been a candy fanatic my whole life. And you go back way on my YouTube channel, I've always just talked about sour candy, what's the best sour candy, how to find the good sour candy, how sour candy is the best. When I'd go to expos, people would bring me, I'd have piles of candy behind me at these expos because people would bring me candies from where they're from, their country. So it's just like my thing, right? So the writing was almost on the wall. And then I got kind of the inspiration, motivation from Christian Guzman, who started 3D Energy. And he was the closest person in my circle to do something like that, for me to be like, oh, that's possible. Going into like the CPG space. Now he had and still has business partners for that. And that is why when I went down the path, I was like, oh, I need business partners. Luckily for me, it ended up not working out with them. And then I ended up doing it all on my own. But candy was just something that made sense. And I knew that I was the ideal customer of it, right? And it's kind of like when you watch like a TV show of like food critics, right? And I'm like, I can never understand, like, that's just their opinion if they think this restaurant is good. Like, how can they be a professional food critic, right? And I understand it when I compare it to myself, where I think that I kind of speak for the people who enjoy sour candy, and my taste buds, I understand what you're looking for. I understand what the consistency, the experience, the taste, the flavor, how does it, does it get stuck in your teeth? Like from start to finish, everything that I'm looking for when I purchase candy, I'm like, I can apply all of those things to creating a brand of someone like me who's a candy fanatic. What would I want in the store? And that's really when I had the light bulb moment of like, hey, like, why don't we create a brand for me and what I would like? And yeah, that's kind of the super long intricacies of how we started it. And it's, and it was kind of like the serendipitous perfect timing where I didn't realize that it was going to be like the peak of my YouTube social media kind of career in 2019. And we launched it like on my 30th birthday. So there was like this big hype, and I had this big, like long buildup, like 6 months of this Project XX, this secret project. It wasn't just like a 2-week thing. And so it was just like this big buildup of this hype. And then it was just kind of like a flawless execution of the announcement, of the releasing, the right timing, the right product, the right brand. And the rest is history. Now we're about to hit our 4-year anniversary, and it has been a wild ride ever since.
So I'll say this: your passion for candy is unmatched, unparalleled. You're
It's funny, I don't want to mean to cut you off. It's funny when people say that, because like whenever I go on any sort of podcast or like a video and people get and ask me questions about the candy, and I have to remind myself, I'm like, Max, shut up at some point. Like no one really cares, but I'll read all the comments and they're like, you can tell this dude is really passionate about candy. And I don't ever process that until I see people's feedback. And it's like, I just want to I want to show people that this isn't just some random moneymaker thing. Like I am the person that I'm making this brand for, and I know what we the people want.
hmm.
So it's like if I used to make jokes all the time. You can go back to watch videos when I was in I think at the time was I in Vienna, Austria? I was somewhere overseas for a More Life video, and we go in this candy shop, and I used to make these comments all the time of like, candy companies should hire me to like approve the final version of their product, because a lot of it sucks. And I'm like, who is approving this candy? And it's like, who would have known that, down the road, it's because I do have, as weird as it is, I do have a passion for candy. Yeah.
There's a phrase I'm not sure if you've heard before, but I think you would agree with it. And it goes, "A bad day eating candy is better than a good day eating salad." Is that
Yeah.
fair? Yeah.
That's good. I mean, man, even if you were to go back and ask even my dad, like I've just been pounding candy ever since I was a kid, like all the time. It's not a sweet treat to have occasionally. It would be like, how many times a week can I have it up until I'm 33 now? So it's
Yeah.
wild, man.
So I know earlier you made a reference to the fact that you stay maybe closer to the surface as you move through life. However, you also referenced that starting a business is stepping into the unknown. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's hard. There's adversity, there are obstacles, etc. Are there any moments that you can think back to at Sour Strips over the past almost 4 years where you had to dig really deep, or where things did get very challenging and you had to find a way to move forward?
Yeah, it's called balancing cash flow. And I think every business owner will deal with it at some point to some level, but definitely getting into some financial, not like troubles, but it's just, with a company like Sour Strips, where I did not take any there's no partners, there's no outside investors. It was just my money. And fortunately enough for me, I did have a nice nest egg to, if I needed money, I could pull from myself. Excuse me. Um, but I invested, like $50,000 into the launch of it, and then wanted it to really kind of live on its own for its entirety. And it has. I've never put any more money in it or raised any money for the company. And there's definitely been some times, not so much recently, maybe like a year ago was the most recent time, but in the earlier stages, year one, two, when we were starting to expand into retail, there were times when we got into a financial bind that I talk about now, but I didn't talk about then because I had just a handful of employees, and you don't want to scare them and go, hey, guys, we have like $5,000 in the bank account, and I just hope this money comes through for these big deals we're doing. And yeah, so those were some really, really tough times of adding a lot of stress and really digging deep to figure out uh unique and creative ways to not only make some money, to make our cash stretch as long as possible and to kind of weather out the storm. There's been a lot of times where with these huge supply chain issues that we were dealing with over the past year to 2 years, probably a little longer than that, 2 to 3 years. Luckily, it's gotten a lot better, but there was times where our candy's manufactured overseas, and there were some delays, and we couldn't wait for the shipment come on the sea, and we had to like air freight, and each air freight shipment it'd be like a $30,000 air freight charge, and it was just a stupid amount of money. And I did that like 7 to 10 times. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars in air freight cost, but it was like what I had to do to keep the business running because I couldn't sacrifice being out of product because you don't know, you can't do that. You can't be out. So yeah, I'd say learning the finances and balancing money while trying to do it yourself to save money, rather than hiring someone to, with expertise to know exactly how to do it, is definitely been the toughest times that I've gone through, at least with the business.
Was there ever a moment where you wondered if sour strips would survive, or was it more so just stressful, not wanting to dip into what you had?
Yeah, I'd say that. So it's always an interesting story because I say how like we got down so low, but like I had a like I could have pulled money from myself, but I compare it because I know that a lot of other business owners are not as fortunate as I was to have built up other businesses to have this money. And I really wanted to challenge myself to be like, hey, do this investment in sour strips and then let it live in its world. Like that's how you can run a good business. I don't look at it as the best business in the world if I have to keep injecting cash into it, right? There's some other issues that maybe you need to analyze to improve your situation. But for us, it was more of a stressful time period rather than thinking the company was going to kind of collapse, right? It was more kind of a first world problem of I knew I had a lot of money coming in from these retail purchase orders, but it was having to front the money so far ahead of time and then wait before the order needed to ship out and then wait another 45 days to get paid for these payment terms where you're floating hundreds of thousands of dollars for, I mean, shoot, 3 to 5 months, up to 6 months. And in a startup business, like you don't have that cash flow, you don't have it. But you just have to get scrappy and do what you need to do to keep the business moving forward. So we managed to pull through, and luckily we're fortunate and blessed enough to be at a substantially better financial place now than we once were. And I'm semi glad that I went through these struggles to really understand the importance of managing the cash flow a little tighter now. So it's a blessing in disguise, but I wish it was a little cheaper of a blessing. I wish that lesson didn't cost me so much money.
Are there other lessons you've learned through entrepreneurship that can extrapolate to just life as a whole and made you a better human?
I love that word, extrapolate. Um, yeah, I mean, the biggest the biggest thing that has made me a better person now through sour strips is definitely managing a team and managing employees because it's different when I was doing like Ever Forward Apparel, my clothing brand, and I just needed kind of like one person to help me pack orders or like, some friends to help pack orders and I'll get them pizza or like, hey, can you just help me with like customer service emails? Like just really simple things that needed to get done, but it really didn't require a lot of intricacies, right? It's just, I just needed physical, I just needed hands, right? I just needed another set of eyes. And now with sour strips, you have a lot of employees and full time and having people rely on you for their livelihood and needing the business to move forward with your decisions, it's because it impacts their life. Has definitely taught me a lot to become a better leader and boss and an entrepreneur. And hopefully that's carried over to a lot of other things in my life of understanding, it's not only about me, but it's also there are a lot of other personalities and motivators that people have that you need to learn and understand that not everyone is like you. Growing up with YouTube and social media and starting these businesses, because I did everything myself, I didn't need people all the time to be like, hey, you're doing a great job, Max. Like you're doing your job. I'm just like, this is my job. I'm supposed to do a good job, right? And with employees, there's certain individuals that do need that reassurance that if you don't like, if they do their job, you need to like, not like you need to like praise them at all times, but they need reinforcement that they're doing a job. And that's how some people are motivated to continue to work better. Whereas like before, I'd be like, all right, hire people. All right, here's what you need to do. All right, I'm gonna go film YouTube videos. I'll be back in like a month, but like you can't do that. You need to be in touch with people. You need to keep the ship moving and keep people motivated and find out how they're motivated. Is it strictly financial? Is it, do they just want raises on a regular basis? Do they want to feel like they are doing a job that is extremely important? Do they want large projects? Do they want simple tasks? So managing people has definitely something that has had carryover to my real life, I guess, because it's a whole stressful world you're living in, and I think that just builds you up to be a better man, person, whatever.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that managing people and leading people is the hardest part about growing the business?
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's necessary for sure. Um, but yes, I would say it's the most difficult, just because when you talk to your employees and your teammates, and again, not only how you praise them, but also how you reprimand them, how you joke with them. I kind of started being like, everyone can take the heat like I can. Everyone doesn't need to be, you know, told that they're doing their job correctly like I do. Not everyone needs direction like I do. And you assume everyone's just like you, but they're not. So yes, I would say that is absolutely up there with the most difficult thing of growing a business. And at some point you get people to manage other people, then you manage people but then you have to manage them to manage them. It's this whole web of the system you're building. So yeah, it's complicated, man.
Yeah. And so as Sour Strips is on a good path right now, do you see yourself starting more businesses down the road? Do you have a passion for building things in addition to candy?
I I think for the longest time, it was like the tradition to just go to college, get a job, and you know, start a family, right? And then now with this hustle culture and stuff, you're basically, before you were a loser if you didn't go to college. Now you're a loser if you do go to college. Now you're a loser if you work a basic job. I don't agree with these things, but that's almost what it feels like. That if you aren't an entrepreneur, you're like conforming to the man and you don't have a passion for yourself. And I don't agree with that, because not only everyone who starts a business will eventually need employees, like you need people that want to work for someone else. Like everyone can't be an entrepreneur, nor should they. But you know uh uh sorry, circle back, original question. I
Yeah. The original question was, as Sour Strips is on this path,
Right,
do
right,
you
right,
see?
right,
Yeah.
right. Multiple businesses. So what I was trying to lead to is, like, I think the cool thing in the entrepreneur world is I own multiple businesses. I look at all my businesses that I own, but as someone who owns multiple businesses, it's, you only have 100%. You can't put 100% into one business, into three businesses, because that's 300%, and it's like when you go on Shark Tank and someone's working a regular job and they started a side hustle, and usually Mark Cuban's like, I want your 100, or Mr. Wonderful's like, I want your 100% focus on this. How can I want you live, sleep, breathe this, and you can't do that with all these different companies. And yes, you can hire people, but at a certain point, you're going to start getting disconnected from these brands because your focus is going to be either what's making the most money, what's your most interest in. And I think there's nothing wrong with having one very, very, very successful business rather than three okay businesses. It really comes down to like a personal choice and what's best for you, and knowing when the writing's on the wall to maybe move on, and that maybe one business was the stepping stone to lead you to this new path, and being accepting of that. But as far as me personally, to simply answer the question, I don't know. I think Sour Strips has a huge growth potential, and it can turn into a much larger thing than just a single product of Sour Strips. It can turn into a true candy brand that has a large, not only array of different products, different SKUs, different extensions, licensing deals, working, the possibilities are endless. So at the moment, at least starting others like CPG's brand, I have zero interest. I absolutely will not get into clothing beyond, ever forward of what I can manage there. So really, no, I think it's making my money work for me and doing some kind of like side things, but I think it's fine to just really laser focus on your one business. And they say put your eggs in multiple baskets, but it gets a little complicated when you just have like one mammoth company. Why would you don't need, sometimes it's not necessary to have multiple companies. I think the only thing down the road I'd like to do that's kind of like a dream for me would be to own a like a restaurant. But even that, I'm not trying to be hands-on and manage a restaurant. I will hire someone, but that's something I want to do like with my capital that can kind of just be like a cool passion thing. I'd said it on my YouTube channel that I want to open a Mexican, like a Tex-Mex Mexican restaurant at some point. So I would really like to do that. So Max, the restaurant owner, because just like with my candy passion, I have a passion for quality Tex-Mex with fajitas and margaritas. So I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of things I love and a lot of things I hate from multiple different Mexican restaurants or Tex-Mex that I go to. As someone who really, really likes it, I know what I like. I know what I hate. What if you took all the things you hate, get rid of them, all the things you like from the 7 different restaurants and put it into one? And I think there's a lot of people like me that would want to go to that Tex-Mex. So I want to say, let's knock on wood that it will happen at some point down the road.
We will be keeping an eye out for that. I'm excited. Now, you mentioned bandwidth, and you gave the example of having 100%. And
Yeah.
in your life, I'm assuming you sleep, so we're going to throw some of that percentage to sleep. Fitness, building the businesses, YouTube, relationships. What's hard for you to navigate with all of this on your plate right now? Does any one area of life feel like you don't have enough bandwidth for? And the reason I ask that is because I think a lot of people who build businesses, and I'm using myself as reference, other entrepreneurs I've talked to, relationships can be hard to manage when you are pouring so much of yourself into this thing that you're building.
Yeah, mine's kind of an interesting dynamic because I really got into a relationship really when the business was standing on its own feet, and didn't need the amount of time because there's for the first year or so, I mean, I could go back in my Instagram stories, but I mean, I was going to the office, getting there at 6:45, 7 a.m., and just locking myself in there for a long time, and doing a lot of work in the deep into the night because it was what I needed to do. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that in a relationship, or I mean, I could have, but it would have sacrificed my partner's needs and wants, right? And hopefully they support you and know that this is what you need to do for the future. But I kind of like met my current girlfriend Taylor, who's just the best, kind of when the business, it's still in its infancy, and there's still some huge things we're working on that are going to require a lot of my attention, but the business is very much able to stand on its own feet, and we have a team developed, and it can run without me needing to be 24/7 on doing something on it. I kind of focus on just like the high level things that are more of like deep planning, execution, and waiting for confirmation and replies, and then going on the next phase rather than physical busy work 24/7. I think I think balancing relationships is super important. And if you look at my life now, it's not the way that I lived to be able to get to this life that I live now. Um, so it's a hard kind of thing to wrap your head around. But one of the greatest things for me that I think adds value to all my businesses would be now meeting my girlfriend. And it's almost like I'm busier and have more on my plate and more like financial obligations now than I ever have. But I also am doing less in the evenings than I ever have, if that makes sense. So now at like 7, when I get home around 7:30, right? I get home around like 7 after like the gym and work and everything with my girlfriend. And, from essentially from 7:30 until about 10, we make dinner, we walk the dogs, we watch TV shows every night, and we just chill. And I don't really do any work unless something critical needs to happen. And I'm able to relax for like the final kind of like 2 to 3 hours of my night, which I never did until I met her. And it's been great to kind of just disconnect. So I think you'll never find the perfect timing, but for me, it seems like waiting for the right person and waiting until I kind of got the business up and running before really locking down with someone was the best case for me specifically.
Yeah. So a couple more questions here. One is on the topic of finance. I think through following along with you through the years, through even some of the podcast titles that you've put out recently to this conversation, it's clear that your mind gravitates toward how do I set myself up well for the future? Has that always been the way that you thought when it came to finances? Were you always forward thinking like that?
I guess I've always just lived in fear my whole life of running out of money and having financial instability, because I saw it all around me. And I don't come from a wealthy family, and it's clearly evident in my super old YouTube videos. I mean, like the house I lived in, the car that I drove. I mean, I wasn't balling out, right? And I was making my money work when I was, making $10 an hour for, up through college and whatnot. And I was always just really good at being frugal with my money and spending money on fun things when it needed to, but not spending money on dumb stuff enough that it would make me. I've never been in. Well, I've owed money, but I've never been in debt to the point where like I owe because I cannot pay it back. There's not like some structure of why I'm doing this thing, but I've never been in debt even before when I was making $30,000 a year, my first job. I feel like I've been smart financially, and as my wealth kind of grew over the past 10 years, it was pretty much like a very it was an upward growth, but it was a kind of slow, right? Recently with the growth of sour strips, that has started growing a little faster, but I think because I never kind of just overnight or in one year had this crazy rocket ship of financial growth, I was always like, okay, you're going to keep working. You need to keep being smart. But, I never really started in thinking about long-term or future Max until within the past couple years. So early in my 20s, it would have been smart to start investing and, whatever, but you don't really think about that. The older you get, the closer you get to death, the more you start thinking about the end of your time. So yeah, no, I've always just kind of I've always been, I feel smart with money, even though people may look at a lot of my decisions. And I've always just lived within my means. And even now, I think I live below. I think I live, I consider myself so fortunate. And, this being my first house is ridiculous, right? And I worked really hard to get to this point, but I still feel that where my businesses are at and how well I've done for myself, I still don't like elevate my lifestyle to match that, because I think that's a slippery slope to go down, because you're always going to be trying to, I think increasing your lifestyle every time your bank account goes up is a poor decision, or it motivates you to work even harder. I don't know. But for me, I don't need much, man. I like, yeah, I mean, coming from like, I'm in this nice house, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's finances is something I really enjoy talking about money. I really enjoy talking about people's mindsets with money. Um, in a non like pretentious way. But yeah, it's just fascinating, I think, because everyone has different views on it and opinions on it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of finance. And I think that we need to talk about finance more, collectively. I think we need to talk about the things we're afraid about more often as human beings. And I appreciate the way that you approach the topic. It also takes a lot of time to build wealth. And like you mentioned, little by little, little becomes a lot, especially when you're being smart about it and you're investing
Mhm.
and you're playing the long game. This is the Project Endure podcast. And when you hear the word endurance, I'm curious what comes to mind for you.
How long you last in the bedroom? I I mean I think it's the it ties back into the classic, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and building yourself up so you can slowly run forever rather than sprinting for a short period of time is the way to live, man.
Yeah. Is there anywhere in your life where you feel like there have been sprints? I'm assuming business, right? Like sprints within the
Yeah.
marathon.
Yeah, I mean that'd be like the single things. I mean when you started like sour strips, when I started that needed to be a sprint because it needed to be a wild success out of the jump. And then what I've learned, which I've seen it a lot in the background and people probably haven't seen it as much, but when you start something successful, a lot of people are going to go, "Oh, me too. Look how easy that is. I can do it. He's done all of the work and the blueprint of how to do this. Let me just, change some things around and boom, I'm also a candy fanatic." It's like, no, you're no. So you needed to sprint so that you can kind of like get through all the weeds, and now we're cruising, but our focus is still there and we still understand that at any moment it can be pulled away from us. So we need to continue to have a faster than normal stride.
Yeah, I think the phrase that comes to mind is practice like you've never won, play like you've never lost.
There you
And
go.
it's that mix of humility and confidence that goes a long way. And I think that's a fine line to navigate. It sounds like you're doing it right. And so
Trying out here.
yeah, man, I got one final question, but before we get to the big final question, I have a selfish question. You have Dude. So Dude is he's a golden doodle, correct?
Yes.
In the background here, and it's been awesome to watch him grow through your channel over time. My wife and I have a 7 month old Irish doodle, so similar in a lot of ways. His personality is just it's blossoming.
Yeah.
He's a puppy, he's interesting. Is there anything you wish you knew before you got Dude, like when he was a puppy, that you know now about him?
Look at that giant stretch he's doing right there. Uh, I mean, I think it's you just got to jump in the deep end with dogs, man. I'm pretty like analytical. Well, no, I take that back. I'm pretty obsessive when I get into something new. It's kind of like when I go to buy anything. I find like this headset's actually broken. After this podcast, I'm gonna go to Best Buy and buy a new set. But for me, it's like I don't just type in like headset. Okay, there's one. Let me buy it. I spend 2 hours looking at the reviews and analyzing what's great about the great and the bad. And when I got a dog, it's a huge decision to get a dog. It's hopefully a very very long relationship that you're going to have with your pupper. And I went down the rabbit hole of really analyzing how to properly raise a dog, and you get a lot of different opinions on that. But no, I mean I followed like to a T, kind of like really what you're supposed to do in the dog training world of how you raise your dog. And because of that, he is a very well behaved, calm, great dog that I can take anywhere and know there's not going to be a problem. I can take him to any indoor, outdoor environment with any other people, and I know exactly how he's going to react, or know exactly how he's going to be. So no, there's not anything I wish I knew earlier, but besides how how great of a feeling it is to have a dog. And luckily I'm extremely fortunate to be able to have for Dude to live 95% of his life next to me at all times. Whereas I know a lot of people, aren't able to have their dog with them, but Dude goes everywhere with me. He's my best friend, and he's the best. Even though he wishes he probably, go to the park every single day, all day, rather than, just, a couple times a week.
Understandable. I've got one more quote and then I'll ask you the last question. This is from Edward Hoagland. And he said, in order to really enjoy a dog, one doesn't merely try to train him to be semi human. The point of it is to open oneself to the possibility of becoming partly a dog. Have you become partly a dog?
I'd say so, man. I mean, I think it's interesting when you get a dog and you start doing the things that maybe even like potentially grossed you out, or like something that you have to do to maybe take care of them or something. But when it's your dog, you're like, oh, I don't even think twice about this. And I imagine that's how it's going to be when I have a child. Whereas now I can't even imagine, um, having a kid. But yeah, I think dude and I are one. Our personalities are one. It's like, yeah, dude's very similar to me, where quite adorable, but sometimes a little annoying. I'm just kidding, man.
Fair enough. So, like I opened the podcast with, people are listening to this, going through all different sorts of things in life. I hope that something in this conversation resonated with the people listening who needed it. If you got to speak directly to the people who are going through something hard that they didn't choose, maybe they lost a loved one, or maybe they're going through something hard that they did choose, maybe they're stepping into the unknown, what would you say to them right now?
I mean, I'm gonna do some tough love, but I mean, I'm gonna say, like, shit happens. I've been around people, some that are connected to me, closer than others, of I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I'll never be this because of X happened to me, or because of how I was raised, or because this happened to me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'm just like in the nicest way possible, who no one cares. Like, no one, you're just making excuses for everything possible. And what I like to think is, unless you are trailblazing a path that has never been done before, which is extremely rare, someone else has done it, the thing that you're doing. You just have to add any what, like, adversities, right? That's the
Mhm.
word. If there's any adversities you've gone through, just ask yourself, is there someone else on this planet that also has dealt with something? And do you think that they've also dealt with something even potentially more? And do you think that they are just sitting around holding themselves in the fetal position and crying about it to this day? No, they've overcome and they've grown from it. And unless you want to let that thing that happened, or this bad situation you're in, like who you are and be your identity, then it's just like, suck it up and move on and figure out how you can evolve from it and make sure that it never happens again. Make sure it never happens to the loved ones that you're surrounded with. And you don't want to be the outlier of the person that could never overcome this thing, right?
Mm.
Um, I think that just because some people may have had a luckier, easier way to get into whatever you're doing, doesn't mean that it might be a little tougher of a journey for you, but it's definitely possible. And I hope to think that my audience and the people that stumble across me can go back and look at where I started 10 years ago on my YouTube, because I've documented essentially my entire life of the past decade, and you can see where I was at, financially, where I lived, what I was going through, the ups, the downs. And I was a very normal guy who came from a very normal family and a very normal background, didn't come from a bunch of money. And, look at me now, I got a golden doodle, anything's possible.
Yeah, just to echo that, I think it's easy to play the victim. I think for a lot of us, if not all of us, the gut reaction when we're going through something hard is to feel like we are the victim, but we're not. What happens to us, we're how we choose to respond. And I appreciate the way that you put that, and I know it'll hit somebody right where they need it. So thank you, Max. Now, if people want to follow along with you, if they want to, experience the journey with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Luckily, I got a super cool name with two X's. You can just search me, Maxx Chewning, on every single social platform. I'm very easy to find on the internet, whether that be good or bad. And I have a couple businesses. You can check them out. But the thing that I always push people to, just like with the Uber pitch, excuse me, is going to be, just come enjoy some YouTube videos. Come watch them. They're free. You're going to have a great time. You're going to get some laughs. You're going to see some really wacky brand integrations. And yeah, it's a good time. So come on over there. And then if you fall in love with me and then you like candy or clothes, I got you covered.
Well, that sounds great. Max, thank you so much again for this time and for everything that you're doing. I appreciate it a ton.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.